Hey everybody, I know you're expecting another food video. Don't worry, more of those are coming soon, I promise. But this time I'm gonna mix things up, do things a little differently. I have a little bit of a political rant. Now, if that's not your cup of tea, I'll just see you on my next video. What? We know it's a political rant because we read the title. Anyway, now I am more than ecstatic that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won. But I have one simple question. Why was it so close? Number one, racism. Now, everyone who knows me really well knows that it takes a lot for me to play the race card. I have absolutely no tolerance for racists. I would never date a racist. I wouldn't want to be friends with a racist. Like, if I'm friends with somebody, I don't care how long I've been friends with them, and I find out they're a racist, then bye, Felicia. Anyway, see, the thing about Trump is that he doesn't even try to hide his racism. It's so blatant. Like, when he first came down that escalator, I believe it was in mid or late 2015, and he said Mexicans are rapists, they're criminals, and I think he said something along the lines of some, I assume, are good people or some crap he said. And then, he tried to build that border wall. And then when it comes to the squad, ALC and Ayanna Presley and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, like, he said that they should go back to where they came from. I mean, first of all, three of them were actually born in this country. I know Omar wasn't, but she is an American citizen like the rest of them. And I don't know why he's so hung up on Omar, but a lot of his rallies, all these people are chanting, send her back. And anyway, and then when it comes to white supremacy, some people have been saying that they think Trump himself is a white supremacist. I don't know if I would go that far, but one thing that really had me thinking was he had some rally in Florida a year or so ago, and he was like rhetorically asking the crowd what they should do if they see like Mexicans or somebody from another country try to come through here, and then someone in the crowd said, "Shoot them!" And then he started laughing. He said, "That's only in the Panhandle you can get away with that." I'm like, okay, you're laughing about shooting somebody that comes from a different country? But then another thing, about when those white supremacists were marching with tiki torches saying Jews will not replace us. And he said they were very fine people. Meanwhile, later on, he goes to denounce the Black Lives Matter movement. And the other thing about the very fine people is, well, I'll get into more of that later. Number two, poking fun at disabled people. Now, y'all remember back in mid-2015, I think it was November 2015, oh, I guess he did come down the escalator in 2015. But anyway, there was that reporter from South Africa named Serge Kowalewski, and he got into it with Trump, and then Trump was at one of his rallies, and he was poking fun at, well, he was mocking what Kowalewski said, and he was like flailing his arms around trying to imitate his disability, and Kowalewski, he has a physical disability. Now, I'm definitely not going to imitate that, because that's just disgusting, and I mean, there really isn't much more to say about that, but anyone who does that is, well, that's just not right. And honestly, as a side note, there's this rapper I used to listen to. I'm not going to say his name, but I stopped listening to him because in at least two of his songs he poked fun at people with cerebral palsy and any kind of disability. Anybody making fun of that just isn't cool in my book. And as a side note, one of my best friends also had mild cerebral palsy, so I really have a problem with that. Number three, veterans. Now, the news story that popped up a few months ago about Trump calling people who fought in the war and got injured or got killed suckers and losers. Now, let me tell you something right now. There are plenty of vets in my family. My brother is a vet. My father is a vet. And they are not suckers, they're not losers. Among other things, he didn't even serve. What he did was fake the bone spurt. I mean, if he didn't want to serve, he could have just said he didn't want to serve. I don't know if he really necessarily had a choice back then, because I'm not sure if they still had the draft back in those days. I mean, I was born in 81, so I'm not 100% sure. But I mean, if you didn't do anything yourself, who are you to say that somebody's a sucker or a loser? Now, granted, I didn't serve either. But I mean, I actually do have a medical condition. I have heart disease. But I mean, even so, I would never call anybody who served a sucker or a loser, and granted, my brother and my dad, I mean, they weren't injured in the service or anything, but okay, people are fighting for our country, so that's the last thing you should call any of them. Number four, applauding fighting and law breaking. No, 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 not just applauding, but encouraging it. Now the thing is like when he was still a nominee for president, he was saying like when you remember when he was saying some things like if you see some people causing trouble, like in other words, people that didn't like him, knock the crap out of them, will you? I will pay for the legal fees. Okay, that's just ridiculous. You're not supposed to be encouraging people to fight. And recently, I believe it was last week, when this Biden-Harris campaign bus were on their way to Texas, Biden and Kamala, they weren't on the bus at the time, but then all these MAGA cars, MAGA supporters surrounded them and literally tried to run them off the road. And what Trump did is what Trump does. He tweeted the video with the phrase, "I love Texas" in all caps. I mean, like, why would you encourage something like that? And that brings me right back to that white supremacy situation in that very first volatile debate, if you can even call that a debate, before that yelling that was going on. I remember when Chris Wallace and Joe Biden both confronted Trump and told him to denounce white supremacists like the Proud Boys. What did he say? Stand back and stand by. Stand back, okay, but stand by? What the hell you mean stand by? And frankly, that's exactly what those people are doing. People like that, because I follow political news religiously, and I saw within the last few weeks, people were interviewing these Trump supporters, and they were saying like if Biden does win, they were saying like what they would do, or in not so many words, like they would take their guns and, well, you can find a lot of that stuff on Google or YouTube. And then like, now I don't live in Michigan, I live in Wisconsin, but I remember like a year or so ago, I remember when things, all this stuff that Trump seems to have. I said Trump has a problem with Omar. He also seems to have a problem with Minnesota Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Now, we all know recently about that kidnapped attempt and possibly murder attempt. But I remember like a year or so ago, like it was all these gun-toting people were around, not just her, but around this courthouse and all the people in there. And what did Trump say? These people just need to be heard. Oh no, those aren't people causing the problem. They just need to be heard. Oh, I see. And even after that kidnap murder plot for Gretchen Whitmer, later on he was at his rallies denouncing her, and he was in Michigan like, you got to get your governor to open up. And I'm like, what is wrong with you, man? Number 5, kids in cages. Now, this is something that really pisses me off. Now, I don't even have kids, and that pisses me off. I mean, I'm sorry, how can people not have a problem with that? I mean, I've even, like on Facebook, I've gotten into arguments with friends or people I don't even know, and I'm like, I mean, these people are parents, and I'm like, how would you like it if your kid were in the cage? The response is, nothing. Which means that either they don't have a problem with it, or they do, but they support Trump anyway, and frankly, those are both bad choices. And the other thing is that if you watch the final presidential debate, the one that Kristen Welker moderated, the thing is that not only did they separate the kids, not only do they not know where the parents are, they don't even care where the parents are. And he said, oh, those kids are being well taken care of. You know what? Kids in cages are not being taken care of, you stupid piece of... Number 6, the pandemic. Now, as Barack Obama said, the pandemic will be difficult for any president to handle. And as much as a lot of Trump supporters might want to accuse the rest of us of, I'm not blaming Trump for the pandemic itself. I'm blaming him for his response to it. Now, back in February of this year, he called it a hoax at one of his rallies. And now this was even before Bob Woodward revealed that Trump actually seemed to understand how serious the pandemic was. But then the rest of us, he still called it a hoax. So in private, he mused about the seriousness, but in public, he just, I don't know, I want to call it laughing it off or whatever. And then he's going to say some things like, maybe we can inject bleach in ourselves, inject sunlight, or whatever kind of crazy crap he said. He said some other things too. I mean, he got to the point where, I don't remember if it was Clorox or some other company, but they actually had to put on their labels, do not put this disinfectant into yourself. Now, I'm like, the President of the United States, 73 or 74, I think, for a person that age to be saying something ridiculous like that, to be running our country, and he said something so outrageous that disinfectant and bleach companies had to actually put a disclaimer, not to little kids, but to everybody. Don't listen to what the person running our country says. Don't put this in yourself. I mean, that is just ridiculous. And because of his, like, he doesn't even seem to care that a pandemic is going on now. Let me just say right now, as much as I dislike Trump, I would not wish illness or death on anyone, not even him. But it's like, when people, like, are kind of indifferent to this kind of situation, or they seem indifferent, I'm always thinking, well, you'll think differently once it hits home. But I guess I was wrong about that, because, let's see, Don Jr.'s girlfriend tested positive. So many people in Trump's orbit tested positive. Trump himself tested positive, and he still doesn't care. I'm like, 230,000 people have lost their lives. Businesses have closed. People can't even see their families on holidays. Thanksgiving's coming up. Thanksgiving is actually my favorite holiday. And it's like, there are plenty of people like maybe Trump's age, a little bit younger, who can't see their grandkids, who haven't seen them in months. And there's people can't go to school because it's not safe. We all have to wear masks. We're all supposed to. And like, he rarely wears one himself. And a lot of people have said, you need to lead by example, but he won't do that. I'm not going to say that wearing a mask is the most comfortable thing in the world, but if that's going to keep you safe, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. And anyway, like I said, I have heart disease, so I was actually wearing a mask long before anyone else had to. Well, that's what my doctor said. But it's like, he still doesn't care about any of this. I have never heard of anyone who literally doesn't care about anyone or anything but himself. Side note, I have 3 close friends who are suffering from COVID, and they all have been very safe, and they still got it somehow. And I pray for them and everyone else who has it every day, and for the people who passed away, I pray for their families every day. Number 7 is my final point. You know, basically, how can I sum this up? Let's just say cult. Because a lot of people have been saying that this is a Trump cult we have going on. I do believe there is a Trump cult, but whether or not all his supporters constitute a cult, that is a little debatable. And it took me a long time to even decide that, yeah, I think there is a cult. And the reason why I think so is because, well, I was having a disagreement with somebody on Facebook, and then one of my friends who is not a Trump supporter, well, you know that hashtag LBVS, laughing but very serious. She said something like, maybe you should kind of reevaluate who your friends are. And basically what I responded was, well, I'm paraphrasing here. I said, everyone doesn't have to agree with everything, which is true, not just of this subject, but on all subjects. Everyone doesn't have to agree with everything, but I just don't understand why anybody would support Donald Trump. And the reason why I consider it a cult is because the more horrible things he does, the more his supporters seem to support him. Whether it be any of the points I made before, or if it's tear gassing peaceful protesters just so you can walk across the street in front of a church and do a photo op holding the Bible upside down. And that's another thing. Who in the world, not just the Bible, but who holds something like this? That seems really uncomfortable. The only time I've ever seen anyone grab something like this is in that claw machine at Chuck E. Cheese when you're trying to grab some toys or something. And that also leads me back to my earlier question. I'm like, why was the race so close? Like I said, I am elated that Biden and Harris won, but it should not have been that close. I mean, just think of all the points I made. Everything from the racism to the kids in cages and everything. I mean, why is it that so many people looked at all that nonsense, all that crap, and said, yes, I want 4 more years of that guy? I mean, really? Really? What am I missing? Anyway, thank you for listening to my rant. I promise we'll be back to more food videos. And, God bless America.